Hi, my name is Isabelle Duverger. I am a French artist. I've been living here for over 15 years. I am a painter, but I'm also an installation artist, and I work a lot with video installations, immersive art, and interactive art as well, together with my collaborator, Laia Cabrera, for all this time. We work a lot with visual poetry, so it's a lot about beauty, but the temporality of also what we are surrounded with. And I guess that's why I'm here, because there's some sort of relationship that emerged, I think, for the audience and for us unconsciously about finite way nature is provided to us or provided to us, surrounding us, and we think it's provided for us. So that's trying to really get a deep awareness of how we are, like, in some way blessed to have this, and it's really not going to last forever, and we're trying to capture that and make people feel that about nature. And I'm talking in particular with our latest piece, Qualia, You Matter to Me, which is actually a visual poem to nature, a love letter to nature. We just presented in October, and that we're going to continue presenting over the course of the next month. And it's also related to our next projects that are coming, that are really about the data and how we have so much data about climate change that would allow us to be able to have agency, but the data is so scattered, and there's like a lack of transition between who has the data and who can do something about it. So we're trying to kind of tie this to nature and to an art installation to make people aware that there's all these tools that are already existing that we can use, that we can actually quantify what is the climate change about. So that's what we're working on right now. How about you?
Thank you. First of all, that's very exciting. I'm David Erdman. I'm the director of the Center for Climate Adaptation at Pratt Institute. I'm trained as an architect and have resided in Southeast Asia, on the West Coast, and in New York, learning in my various parts of my career as an educator and as a practicing architect, different aspects of climate change that led me to the position that I'm currently in. For the UN SDG Summit, which just occurred in September, and New York Climate Week, we put together a series of exhibitions. We co-curated 4 of them called Adaptations, which are on display in Nolan Park on Governor's Island. The house on Governor's Island, for us, we've had since 2020, and it's a space to convene, share work, show exhibitions, and have talks that surround different aspects of climate change. The 4 exhibitions are called Adaptations. A lot of work in science and engineering and in the arts has been really wonderful over the past several decades in the sector of climate change. A lot of it's been focused on mitigation or trying to stop climate change. There's an emerging area, and I think this might relate a bit to some of your work, that revolves around how to live with climate change, what's known as climate adaptation. And that really brought these 4 exhibitions together. On the ground floor, we have 3 exhibitions. So one of them is a firm from Brooklyn. They've built projects in Brooklyn, Mexico, in various parts of Europe that try to change our living behavior. So their adaptation is through how we live in these housing structures that are, I call them thick, but they kind of get you to live indoors and outdoors. There's another Danish firm that's based in New York that are designing artificial archipelagos. So these are self-sufficient floating structures that they've built in Denmark, now in Busan, and that they've proposed at a larger scale with the UN. That work includes models of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, which you may know about. That's part of the Big U, a coastal defense project in Lower Manhattan. It's the first time the public will get to see the model segment of that right under the Williamsburg Bridge. And in the middle, we have 2 workshops that we've done in New York and Singapore with the UN, with local and international partners using artificial intelligence as a co-imagining author that looks at different issues of urban design in the 2 cities. So that ranges from historic creeks and exposing them to making more absorbent, spongy urbanism that can retain more water or more horticulture. And then upstairs, we have graduating student work from our Master of Science programs. The architecture students are working with robots. They're prefabricating structures to adapt the buildings in Nolan Park through what's called a climate core. Some of that's through found material, like oyster shells that they use to mix in with concrete. Some of it's grown, like mycelium. And then our urban design students are working across Buttermilk Channel and Red Hook, doing these large, dense urban structures that are really looking at how to amplify resource capacity in Red Hook through water and forestry and other components. So together, that work produces a conversation between different generations, different scales of work around the subject of climate adaptation, really with the hope that we can engage the public and a broader audience around how to live with climate change. When we think about nature, it's the symbolic sides of nature, trees, sun, rolling landscapes. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about how you construct it synthetically and the immersive aspects of it.
Well, so we have this piece that is called Qualia You Matter to Me, which we made with Laia and Laia Cabrera, and we collaborated also with musicians for this piece, and that created 5. Usually we create video art pieces that are one piece that goes from beginning to end, and here we created really 5 distinctive parts, and it was Qualia You Matter to Me, and within those segments, it was really, qualia is kind of the realization for the first time, a very subjective realization of a sensation, but it's this hyper awareness of that at that moment of what is, and it's a discovery also. So we kind of created a moment that was qualia, which was basically trying to put us in that state of awareness, and then we created a part that was you, and it was very much about the human in their time and their loss of time, because we're completely disconnected with nature's time. We're like in a short span living state where we don't have any idea really of what's going to happen in the future, which is why climate change was so intangible for so long, I feel, and that's why we have not reacted to it sooner. But there's the you with the sense of time, the sense of the human being running after time, etc. And then you have matter, which we changed the meaning of matter to go back to the essence of like what surrounds us, the molecules, the going back to really the essence of what surrounds us. And then there was the 2, which was basically our relationship between, but just the feeling of the 2, of the embracing of nature with the human So that was the segment 2, and then we had the segment me, which was really about finally that realization that me is also me in nature, me as nature, and kind of the merging of the two. And it had, interesting enough, the immersiveness had this effect on people, which was a lot of the feedback we got. We were so immersed in that piece when we were creating it that I think we didn't see with enough distance the impact that people would have with that relationship that people would have with the piece, because they would come from outside and they would come with whatever the baggage they have emotionally from outside, and they would come into this immense space with these gigantic projections and sound that was so immersive and precisely created for the visuals, and in collaboration, like as an exchange dialogue between the music and the visual. And people would come into and then step away, be able to kind of like feel part of the piece, and then be somehow pushed away from the piece to kind of get that perspective that there's the you and the it. And so that was I think what was kind of important about the piece, that people would emotionally connect at very different levels that we didn't have, because we didn't make it with each qualia is individual, and so there was this experience of very subjective experience of everyone with the piece. So I think we work a lot with emotions, and that's kind of what we were expecting, but not expecting as much, is that the people would really feel like embracing that nature and that relationship to nature, and that it's not a critical piece about climate change per se, but it is an awareness that nature is like.
No, I think that's really exciting. The emotive, there's a lot of emphasis on solutions and data and, more trees, more water, but the human connection to it and the emotive connection to it is what ultimately will make it livable. That, there's a lot of strong overlap with what we talk about in our workshops, the work we're doing with the New York Climate Exchange and the design of that, of how people will connect with that. And it's, it's interesting. There's a writer and philosopher, Jonathan O'Donohue, who talks about clocks. And, our circadian rhythm gives us a rhythm. But when you feel clocks that aren't human, it heightens your awareness. This is why rustling leaves or rivers become entrancing. And I'm sure, that temporal, when it's not you, actually makes it more immersive and engaging. And that's a really important aspect of design. So for the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, or even the urban proposals that we're looking at with the UN and other partners, one way to assess it is not just what the metrics of it are, but it's really how does that engage you? So AI helps us with our community partners. It enables, because it visualizes so fast, a lot of those emotive connections, which can be as beautiful as they might be, horrific. They might be like, oh my gosh, we don't want to do that. But I think it's such an important part of the climate change discussion, because oftentimes we jump to the metrics, the mechanics, and if we can't connect to it, it won't be livable in the long run. That's a fundamental part of adaptation.
I'm very curious about what you mentioned, because somehow it can be applied to other territories, and I understood that you travel a lot, and I think there's like some projects that are actually going in that direction, and then even beyond now with the AI and
the workshops that we started in March with the UN Water Conference. We did another one in Singapore this summer, and we'll do a third one in Chile in December, and then a fourth one we're in discussions with Setouchi in Japan to do next summer. So I'll be going to Patagonia and traveling the Patagonian archipelago with 60 Chilean students, where we're going to be flying drones and working on this expedition ship using AI to help governments in those islands think about developing more island independence so they can produce their own food, capture their own water. But a big part of that in those regions where you have wonderful myths and indigenous cultures and artisanal practices is how that future development can enrich and bolster the way that they currently live there, to give it vitality. So some similar discussions come into play there, because they have a lot of spiritual and emotive, collective, cultural, connections among Chileans, and certainly for people who live in those regions. In a nutshell, I think what's important about climate change is it's happening and we need to adapt. So any way that we can make it livable and that we can test those models will be important to future generations.
Climate change is a complicated moment to really have an optimistic view on, like that it can actually be slowed down, that it can be stopped. I think at an individual level, there will be a small impact we can have, but I do believe that cooperation aligned with the government can really make big change happen. And I think that's what cooperation has started to do. Some of them, very few of them. And that's where I think the future is. It's a combination of technology and behavior. And I do think that that will be the solution.
So your work kind of tries to model or provoke that behavior through immersive experiences, or heighten our awareness and our attentiveness. It, in a way, reshapes your behavior by going to it.
We're still working on something. It was very premature to create it for the COP23, but it's a project that we still have with some partners that are interested in that project. I don't want to divulge too much, but it's basically creating an awareness for an audience also that is those big corporations and those big positions in governments that would be kind of confronted to climate change, and confronted also with the agency that they have, because it's not so much that there's a fatality here. There's so much we can do, and there's so much that people need to get together to do.
I will give a plug to my friend Justin Bryce, who made this with Timothy Morton. We are the asteroid, which I think is, we all need to remember that, right? We made this happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was around 15 years ago. I came across authors like Bill McKibben and Alan Weissman and Peter Frankopan and Naomi Klein. And they were all, of course, talking about climate change. That scientists have been ringing the bell since the 70s. Many people have been writing since the 80s, but nobody. So around then, I also used to work in advertising. So I started to look for newspapers and news that were covering climate change, global warming, to be more precise, and I couldn't find much. And every time I would find a headline or a passage of an article, I would start incorporating that into my work. And that's how that series with newspapers came along. Aesthetically, I liked the texture of the newsprint behind the painting. But what I was also interested in incorporating news about global warming. And that's how all this work started, and it's been 15 years or more. It's ongoing. Why do I do this? Because a dear friend of mine, who's no longer with us, once said to me, well, why would you waste a platform and waste a way of reaching out to people to make climate change part of the conversation? And I honor that idea she had. So I used to paint nudes, I used to paint landscapes, I still do that, but why not make this part of the conversation? It's a crisis, it's urgent, and everything depends on it. It's not political, even though everything is political, but it's not partisan. These are like over 95% of the international scientific community agrees that this global warming has been caused by humans, and we are the cause, and we have to find a way to mitigate, stop it, change it, and that's the boat that we're in. Formally, in terms of art, I think you can look at the work and analyze the patterns and the textures and the colors and the composition. But what happens with these news is that the viewer also has a chance to, if he or she chooses to do so, to get closer to the artwork and read the headlines and read the passages from the news. So you have that option. You can look at it from a distance and enjoy it or not, like any other painting, or you can dive into it. Probably like 5 years ago, I came up with this silly hat that I built, and I went to the Easter parade in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral and the Bonnet Parade, which is a beautiful thing in New York City. And again, why miss the opportunity and not make, in this case, plastics part of the conversation? So I've been going there every year, and the hat has been growing. Every year I add more plastic to it. And this last August, I was invited for a group show in Venice, and it had to do also with global warming. And I decided to also incorporate the plastic pollution and also the rise of seawater, which is, Venice is the victim number one. So I combined both in an action, in a performance action, that in a way combines both things, the rise of sea level due to global warming, but also plastic pollution, and also has to be taken care of. Coca-Cola and Nestle are the international biggest polluters in the world. It's all over. You have to go to the sources and you read all about it. So there are many things I think we have to take care of, and I think that art can hopefully help people to look at things differently. And if they decide to, they can get inspired and contact their government representatives, demand strict legislation, but we also have to do our part. That's me talking, is not my sources. I think we all have to somehow adjust our consumption behaviors. whether it's reusing everything and reducing our consumption, eating less meat, less dairy. There are many things we can do, and it's all over. Anybody who's interested can Google that, and you will find plenty of things you can do at home to fight this crisis, but we have to talk about it. One of the pieces that you were asking me before is about the relationship between the economy and ecology, and I have a particular piece about that, where they are hand in hand. And I think it's pivotal because we need the economy, everybody needs to work, of course, we all need to make a living. But it would be nice if they are more aligned with the ecology. Think of nature as us being part of it, which we are, instead of all this policy of extractivism and endless economic growth. One of the things that I was working that summer that you kindly invite me to Governor's Island for your transborder art residency was in the concept of wants versus needs. One of the first, I think, lessons in economics is that resources are limited and wants and wishes, human wishes, are unlimited. So we have limited resources in this planet and these 5 minutes of life we have. And we think it would be interesting if we dance with it, we work with it, instead of dominating it and extracting, which was, the mentality and the policy of the last 200 years. So those are my 5 cents when it comes to that. Well, you know that I taught for many years in New York City public high schools, and I'm a firm believer in education. Now we have some company here today. And yes, education is it's pivotal. I mean, we have to get informed, we have to make smart decisions, and it all starts at home. Education at home, education at school, and in school. And people have also their responsibility and their duty, again, to contact your government representatives, demand strict legislation on climate change, and also do your part. And that's where education kicks in as well.